Okay, good evening, everybody. David Paul with you. Hurricane Ian update. It is Tuesday evening. It is September the 27th, and less than 24 hours away from landfall, it appears, of a major hurricane, as Ian has continued to maintain its major hurricane status all day today, even after crossing Cuba early in the morning and maintain Cat 3 status. And it looks like it's likely to become a minimal Cat 4 before eventually making landfall on the west coast, the Gulf Coast of Florida. We'll get to all the details as we move along here. Winds this evening, 8 o'clock advisory from the Hurricane Center, 120 mile an hour sustained near the center. The winds moving north-northeast at 10, so an easterly component is now part of the forward motion of Ian, and that has had impacts on updating where the track is taking it this evening and into tomorrow. Take a closer look at the storm system. We've been watching this carefully in the Weather Center all day long. Notice how the eye has been shrinking right there. We were struggling to identify if this was bringing in some dry air and actually weakening a little bit, or if it's about to go through another eye wall replacement cycle, which is can be a strengthening event for a tropical system. And it looks more like it's going through an eye wall replacement cycle. The eye is still very well defined. Doesn't look like it's pulled in any dry air of any significance. And because of that, even though it's at 120 miles an hour now, Cat 3, Hurricane Center does expect it's going to go to max winds of 130 before landfall as we head into Wednesday. And now it looks like early to mid-afternoon landfall. Visible satellite, you can clearly see the eye as it came off the Cuban coast early this morning. Maintains its intensity. You can see a nice stadium effect there around the eye. You only get those in major hurricanes. You can see the sea surface at the bottom. And we'll let this go one more time on these visibles. As the sun gets lower on the horizon, look how you can really see the components, the complexity of those overshooting cloud tops near the center. Okay, so upper level winds. Where we find Ian this evening is on the western edge now of a ridge of high pressure. Can you see the center of the ridge? The center's moved out here over the open Atlantic Ocean. So there's the ridge. And now that it's on the western edge of that ridge, that's helping to move it in a northerly motion. And then it's also beginning to feel this trough, which is going to want to pull it north-northeast. And so those two vectors combined are what are giving us a north-northeasterly motion now for the storm as we head into this Tuesday evening. The northerly component coming around that ridge, and then a northeasterly, if not east-northeasterly, pull from the trough racing through the Carolinas and off the east coast. Those are the winds up at 34,000 feet. But again, this storm is so strong, it's poking up, and it feels those winds up at 30 and 34,000 feet. European and American models are in very tight agreement this evening. They want to bring this hurricane in the center just north of Fort Myers, which would put Charlotte Harbor in a very vulnerable position. We'll take a close look at surge potential here in just a moment. On a track like that, though, Tampa and Tampa Bay, you would be on the offshore wind side of this thing, and your surge threat would be much lower, much diminished for the Tampa area, even with a track so close to you, because you'd have the winds blowing offshore. Both models bring it right over Orlando as we head through Thursday, Friday, and then bring it just off the coast near Jacksonville. And at this point, it may still be a tropical storm. Jacksonville, Savannah, Charleston. We'll have to watch that. And then into the mountains where it may become quite a rainmaker. And we'll look at that long-range forecast here as well. The wind forecast profile. Here we are Tuesday at 8 p.m. Key West, going in between strong tropical storm winds and Cat 1 hurricane gusts out on Key West this evening. The center of the storm is about 70 miles to the west of Key West. We go forward in time into Wednesday noon. So this is when the worst of the storm will be making landfall, perhaps near Fort Myers, Charlotte Harbor. You'd have that onshore wind. That would create a significant surge threat for you, but winds would be Cat 2, if not stronger, at landfall. Storm continues to produce hurricane force winds, Category 1, Category 2, perhaps on the northern side of the system as well. So Tampa, Sarasota, you may feel gusts to Cat 1 in Tampa. Sarasota, gusts to Cat 2, certainly possible, if not likely. This is Wednesday evening. And then it quickly weakens to tropical storm strength as it moves over Orlando going into Thursday and Thursday morning. Let's take a closer look at how the wind field is going to impact surge and where the greatest surge threat will be. This always comes down to very, very fine sharpening of the pencil. And what we're looking at is the European model. But as we look at this, understand that this exact forecast, we're getting really high resolution now. It could be 30, 40 miles one side or the other, which could change what I'm going to show you here. But here's the way we stand on this Tuesday evening. This is going into Wednesday at 7:30 a.m. So at this point, here's the center, Charlotte Harbor, Fort Myers. That water is being forced up into the harbor. And this could rapidly begin to raise the sea levels here. That's your storm surge coming in the morning before 7:30, starting at least at the latest 7:30 Wednesday morning. At the same time, Tampa Bay, look at the winds blowing offshore. This may be a repeat of a couple of years ago where we had the bay actually dropped as the winds blew the water out of the bay. That is a possibility, and that's what would happen if this forecast verifies. But it's got to verify exactly as I'm showing it to you. We go further into the day on Wednesday. This is 6 p.m. So again, that is a wind that is still forcing water into Charlotte Harbor. And Fort Myers is taking a very hard hit from a major hurricane at this point. Look at Tampa Bay, Sarasota. Its strong winds are offshore. They're going to gust to hurricane force or above Sarasota. But that again is blowing the water out of Tampa Bay. That's 6 p.m. That would, if this verifies, significantly reduce your surge threat here. And then the winds begin to wind down, but we continue with a broad tropical storm force wind field, Orlando, Sebring, Fort Pierce, Daytona Beach, as we head into Thursday morning and Thursday afternoon. Oh, and at this point, by Thursday early afternoon, wind again is offshore, blowing the water out of Tampa Bay, and finally blowing the water out of Charlotte Harbor. This part of the country is the most susceptible to storm surge, without a doubt, and it has everything to do with how shallow the shelf is. So you have this very broad area of shallow water that extends out 150, 200 miles from the coast of Florida. After that, it drops off down to 10,000 feet. Very deep water here in the Gulf of Mexico. But storm surge threat, a large function of that is how shallow the water is leading up to land. And in this case, you have this very long, shallow continental shelf. And that allows the energy to not be pushed down deep into the ocean. It all stays near the surface, and all of it ends up pushing onto land. And that's why the storm surge threat is so significant here, because of that 150, 200 mile continental shelf that extends out away from the west coast of Florida. Again, we're 10,000 feet water depth here, between 65 and 650 feet here, which sounds deep, but it's not. It's much, much shallower than 10,000 feet. And in fact, as you get relatively close to the coastline here, it's less than 65 feet. And so all of that shallow water enhances the storm surge, the rise in water as the storm approaches. It enhances that threat. In contrast, on the east coast of Florida, it's a very sharp drop-off. It goes from the beach down to 1,000 feet very, very quickly. And because of that, your surge zones stop west of I-95. You're not going to get a surge threat west of I-95, whereas on the west coast, it extends in some cases as much as 50 miles because of that shallow continental shelf. So here's the forecast as it stands this evening, but this is in flux because Tampa Bay, we've got a surge forecast up to 9 feet. If you get that offshore wind, if this does go in further south, you're not going to get a 9-foot surge here. It may be just the opposite. There are always some question marks and some surprises in these big hurricanes as they make landfall and make their final, very fine-tuned adjustments to their path. I think this is right on. This is where we've got the biggest storm threat as we stand right now. Storm surge threat up to 12 feet from Sarasota to Venice, especially Port Charlotte, Charlotte Harbor. That's where the water just could be funneled in here. Very susceptible to surge. Cape Coral, Fort Myers, down to Bonita Springs, up to 12 feet. And then lower than that as you head down toward Naples and further south. So here's a look at the Hurricane forecast cone from the Hurricane Center as of 8 o'clock this evening. By 1 p.m. Wednesday, it's 130 mile an hour Cat 4 hurricane just about to make landfall between Port Charlotte and Fort Myers. Quickly weakens to a 1 as we head through Wednesday night and into Thursday morning. It's a 65 mile an hour tropical storm by Thursday afternoon near Orlando. Significant breezy conditions and rain. You can still have a tremendous number of tornadoes with this and power outages well inland. Orlando, you know the drill on that, but that's what you're looking at. As far as what it may look like on radar, again, we're looking at the European model, and I've overlaid the hurricane forecast from the Hurricane Center, the forecast cone, taking a Cat 4 into Fort Myers a little bit right toward noon on Wednesday, maybe a little bit afternoon. Heading inland, heavy rain across Florida. I want you to quickly notice this, though. So although this is the dirty side of the storm, in theory, notice how there's much less rain here. And many of the models are picking up on this. They're putting most of the rain across the central and northern part of the peninsula. That's because, remember that front that came in here that's kind of pushing this thing off to the east? Well, that boundary is still sitting up in here, and that moisture is going to interact with that front, and this may very well indeed be where we get the heaviest rain, would be the northern portion of the Florida Peninsula. And then going into Thursday night, we may still have a tropical storm. It may get back offshore into the Atlantic. So Jacksonville, Savannah, Charleston, you may have significant wind and rain all the way up into the South Carolina coast by Thursday evening. Again, here's a look at that rain total estimate, and this is a scene that we've been watching play out on many of the different model runs from run to run, that we're getting the heaviest rain totals up here across the northern third, if you will, of the Florida Peninsula. And that is because we've got a leftover weak frontal boundary sitting in here, and that will act as a speed bump. And as that moisture is slung up into that speed bump up it goes. You lift the air, it cools, condenses, creates rain droplets, drops, and you get your heaviest rain along that boundary. So easily could see a foot of rain or more. Ocala to St. Augustine, Daytona Beach, 22 inches, Deltona, 23 inches of rain possible. Orlando, could you see 20 inches of rain? It's not out of the question, but pinpointing exactly who's going to get 8 inches and who's going to get 20 inches is just not possible. That 21-inch bullseye near Orlando could just as likely be over Tampa, just because the model's saying 9 inches. We're really splitting hairs right here, and what you have to understand is that the potential is there for many spots to get 10 to 20 inches of rain. We just don't know exactly where that's going to play out, but the potential is there. So here's the big picture, big steering currents. There's our ridge, the storm being pulled north by that ridge. On the backside of the ridge, here's the trough, digging in, giving it that easterly component as well. There's also a little troughiness out here that's also helping to scoop everything up and move our storm, which is right here to the north and northeast. That's what's steering it. Where is it headed in the long term? Well, here we are going into Friday, where we may still have a tropical storm near Jacksonville, Florida. Notice how the streamlines, the winds are spreading out up at 34,000 feet while it interacts with the moisture left over from Ian. So if you take your hand and you open it up like this, spread your fingers, just like the winds are spreading out here. So what you get is empty space in between your fingers. So that's a vacuum. Empty space is a vacuum. Vacuum up at 34,000 feet helps to lift the atmosphere. So this could produce very heavy rain on the coast of Georgia, South Carolina, even into North Carolina, even inland North and South Carolina. Could see very heavy rain as that continues to move in Friday, Saturday. We go into Sunday. Tremendous amount of moisture with these systems lingering into Tennessee, Kentucky, West Virginia, Virginia. Could be a flash flooding threat Sunday. Snow in the Rockies. Seasons are changing. We follow it. We could still be a heavy rainmaker lingering into Monday across the Virginias into D.C., up the Delmarva. And then we go into Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and the remnants end up near Halifax, Nova Scotia as a rainmaker. Snow coming across the northern plains. We are indeed about to change seasons here. All right, that's where we stand with Ian on this Tuesday night. Folks, we're with you. We're thinking about you in Florida. just try to make the best decisions that you can. Run from the water if you're in a storm surge area. If you can stay put and you're away from a flooding threat, if you can hide from the wind, that's the best thing to do if you have supplies. I expect the power will be out where this thing makes landfall for several weeks. And I think the entire country is prepared to help y'all in Florida as this storm comes in on Wednesday. I read your comments. Hit me up on social. Stay weather smart and stay safe as this storm moves in on Wednesday.